I'm going to have 20 pieces, 10 each of 15N20 and 1084 or thereabout. And I'm stacking these in a way that I want a dark center in the feather pattern when we get it done. And we'll go ahead and get it tacked up. I just want to tack it to where it'll hold till I get the forge weld done. I'm going to put it in some kerosene. And we'll go ahead and get it into the press and make the forge weld. I'm just going to press it lightly the first time, not too hard. And then I will do this forge welding process 3 times before we start doing any drawing. Once I feel like I've got a good forge weld, then I will press it from the sides. So now I put it in the squaring dies and I'm bending those layers down. I want to create seeds. And then when I draw it out and cut it up, restack it, I can make W's. And from W's you can make all kinds of things. But that's where we want to go with it. We want to make W's. So now we should be around 80 layers. Back in the kerosene, doing the same process as before. And with a little magic, we got it cut up and we're going to restack it and should have around 240 layers at this point. And to kind of match the pattern, I'm going to flip every other one or every other bar. In this case, just 3 bars. I'm going to flip number 2. And that way we can kind of match our pattern on the end. Not so critical with feather, but with any other kind of mosaic, you would definitely want to match your pattern. So here I'm numbering each bar that I'm going to cut for the stack. So I've got the billet drawn out, got all the pieces cut and very flat. You want them very flat. This is a pretty critical weld we're about to do. And as you know, the pattern is on the end of the bar. We're going to want this pattern to be on the side of the blade when we're done. Right now, we want to prepare to weld up a stack. As you've seen, I got all of these numbered, and we want to rotate them in a way that we try to match that pattern. So we're going to flip each one so that our end cuts will somewhat match. So what we want to do, I got them numbered here 4 through 9. I'm going to use these 3 other pieces for another project. First thing I'm going to do is get these tacked up, weld them on top of a bar, get them forge welded, hot split, and we'll clean them up, put them back together, and draw out our blade or billet. So let's get to it. It's very easy to screw up right here with this tall stack, and with taller stacks it's even worse. And same thing here, I'll do it 2 or 3 times to make sure, but when you go to split it, you're going to be putting a tremendous amount of stress on those forge welds. So you can see that my cut is going off to one side somewhat, and I try to correct that by putting a shim on one side. Now I'm going to clean up these pieces and get them flat the same way. I want them good and flat and clean. And we'll tack them up, forge weld them back together, and start drawing it out into our feather billet. All right, since we got our billet split, and now I got it flattened and tacked back together, it's time to forge weld it again, turn it over, and draw it out. That will expose our pattern here, our feather pattern. Before I do that, I'm gonna soak it in kerosene, and you see me do that a couple times in the video. But the reason I do that is that the theory is it creates a carbon soot layer in there whenever you put it in the fire, and will help it from oxidizing and help you get a better forge weld. Also, I put flux on it before I stick it in the forge. That way I don't have to pull it out and risk oxidizing and scaling up. Flux it before I go in, and I don't pull it out. I've been doing this way for about 5 years or so, and it seems to work well. So the theory stands up for me. As you can see, we have a small piece of steel. You remember what we started out with. You lose a lot of steel to scale and that sort of thing. So, but I do have another piece, and I'm going to be making some folder blades out of it. It's just a little smaller than this one. So this is not the true representation of the whole billet, but I'll show you right here. Got it sitting in the awl. This is the other piece. Let's get this done. And once I'm sure we got a good forge weld, we'll go ahead and draw out our billet to the thickness we want. So with our billet completely forged out, it's time to go ahead and forge the blade. And what I like to do on feather or any mosaic, I don't like to forge it to shape because it distorts the pattern too much. What I do like to do is to move the stem of the feather around to match the blade. I want the stem to move up and go through the ricasso, and I want the stem to come out in the point. And it really looks nice when you do that. So I'll be shaping this a little bit, getting the point on there. I've cut off the ends a little bit, as you can see there, to not forge it too much, and then forge out the tang. It's really look nice when it's done right. Hopefully I'll do it right. Here I'm going to go ahead and forge in the ricasso, trying to push that stem or center of that feather up into the center of the ricasso. And now we'll go ahead and get the tang forged out. And you can see we'll have our general shape. I'm not going to forge the bevels. I don't want to distort it. And I'm going to surface grind it to the thickness I want and do 3 rounds of thermal cycling. This will help reset the carbides to where when we go to do our hardening, we'll evenly disperse those carbides and get a good, even, heat-treated, hardened blade. Here I'm going to use a carbide file guide to cut in the guard shoulders. I normally do this with a 3/16 end mill on my milling machine, but anybody can cut these with a file guide. I mean, I did it for years without a file guide. Now I'm going to cut a back groove on the back side. That way I can undercut my guard fit to where it'll bump up to the shoulders and it'll look like the ricasso disappears into the guard. I don't always do this. Sometimes I just do a press fit. I'm going to go ahead and scribe some center marks on here. Do a rough bevel. Main thing I want to do here is just cut down to those center marks with a 45-degree bevel. I'll heat treat it, then come back and do the finish grinding. And we're going to go ahead, stick it in the oven, get this thing hardened, and off to the temper. Boom, she's got a sole now. Come out good and straight. I'm going to stick it in between a couple aluminum plates just to keep it straight. So we got it tempered, and you can see how that pattern just pops out of there. Now we'll go ahead and get these bevels ground. Something else to mention, I didn't forge in a distal taper. So what I'm doing here, while I'm grinding the bevel, I am also grinding a distal taper. My favorite part, knot. I usually hand sand up to around 800 or 1,000 grit. For the guard material here, I got some Damascus I made just for guards. Go ahead and get it cut up, cleaned up. Nothing like a warm fire on a chilly morning. And coffee, of course. Kind of nippy this morning. So I got the guard material cut out. This is 180 layers of just W's. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and lay it out, and I'm going to take a bit and cut down to where I'm leaving about 40 or 50 thousandths to actually fit up on the front or against the guard shoulder. Then I'll come on the other side and cut the tang slot to fit the tang slightly under, actually a couple thousandths, where I'll have to hammer it on. This makes it easier to fit up. You got less material to mill out when you can just hog it out on the back side. Makes a good fit, works great. For the back cut end mill, I'm using a 3/16 end mill. And I'm using a 1/8 end mill to cut the main slot, and I have to move it over about 13 thousandths on each side to get it to the size I want, which is a couple thousandths under. Now we'll go ahead and do our hot fit. I want to leave an impression from those shoulders in that guard where I can tweak it, but I'm about 2 thousandths under. This should give us a good fit, and I can clean it up from here and make it fit nice. It looks pretty good. So now I'm going to use a guard template to lay out my guard shape. I quickly profiled it, but now I'm going to go ahead and do the sculpting that I want on. I'm going to cut the finger groove and the facets on the front side of the guard. Do a little contouring there to where it'll be nice and rounded and comfortable in the hand. And that looks pretty good. Off camera, I went ahead and cut a piece of water buffalo horn. I want that to be a spacer in between it and the antler material. Got this piece of elk horn here. I'm going to go ahead and cut it to length. Time to go ahead and bore it out for the tang. Working with any kind of antler is not fun. For one, you can't never find the right shape you want. I like to hand pick my antler. After I drill the hole, I use a couple handmade broaches to get it to the width and length and all that good stuff. Do a little test fit. You got to make sure you're square, and you got to make sure your tang comes out in the center of the horn. And now it's time to thread it. I'm going to cut it 3/16 for a 1032 thread. The width don't really matter here. The main thing is you got two sides that are to dimension. So I've got it 3/16 wide, and that'll be plenty of threads. A little tapping fluid, and we'll start tapping. I like to use a wrench because a tap wrench is so big. I feel like I have more control with a small wrench. Now I've got a piece of that feather bar left over, and that's what's going to be our pommel. I'm just going to cut down about 20-30 thousandths, and I'm going to be welding a tang nut that I made on my lathe to screw on to the tang. I'm just going to fuse all the way around the tang nut. That's plenty. You can't rip it off with your hands. I've tried. Now that I got everything fit up and I've got the pommel on there, I want to go ahead and clean up the front side. I'm not doing a museum fit. I'm going to have everything flush to the guard. I've got lineup pins in the guard, through the spacer, into the antler, so it can't move. That way, when we take it apart and put it back together, we still have good flush fits there between the spacer, antler, and guard. Go ahead and get our blade and guard etched. Logo is already done, and you can see those lineup pins there. I'm going to go ahead and start assembling. I've already glued the guard and spacer together into the tang. I use JB Weld for that. Master Smith J.W. Randall taught me to do that. And we're going to go ahead and fill this thing with epoxy, get her good and tight and lined up. I want that pommel straight up and down with the blade. Now I'm just going to grind it down to where I almost touch the horn. And I'll finish it up to around 600 grit to where it's barely touching the horn, because we're going to do some sculpting next. So now I'm just going to round the pommel off, finish it to where it's good and thin, and it looks good. So I'm using a couple carbide burrs, a 1/8 and a 1/4 inch. So I'm matching the grooves in the horn to make it look like they ran out and through the pommel. I think it's a really nice look, adds a lot of character to it. Now I'm going to go ahead and etch the pommel. I think it turned out pretty good. I really love the look of antler. The pommel looks great on there. Got a nice fit up on the guard. Something I really like to do. But I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'd like to thank my patrons, and I'd like to thank you for watching.